If you've just been laid off, this video will help you proactively take control of your finances. If you don't know who I am, my name is Chris Dime. I'm a certified financial planner out of Edmonds, Washington, and I specialize in working with folks to and through retirement. Obviously, with the most recent layoffs in 2022 and then here in 2023 and continuing here in 2023, there's a lot of people in career transition. In these career transitions are going to come some financial opportunities as well as some financial tools that you're not going to want to forget about. Outside of the basic blocking and tackling, if you do get laid off, such as having an emergency fund prepared, keeping expenses low, etc., there's going to be a few prime movers that are unique to your employer that you're going to want to make sure you take advantage of. In today's video, we'll focus on some of those prime movers relative to your investments as well as your insurance planning. So let's jump in. First up is the 401k or 403b, 457b, etc. Pretty much any employer-sponsored retirement plan. Once you've been let go, you will not be able to make any additional contributions to this plan, and any matching contributions or profit sharing contributions by your employer, you should expect those to stop as well. Now, depending on the size of the employer-sponsored plan we're talking about, there's going to be a few different options you have, as well as a few different options your employer has, or really the custodian behind your employer. A custodian meaning investment custodian like Fidelity, Vanguard, etc. If your account is worth less than $1,000, your employer has the right to send you a check for the value of your 401k, and you're responsible for putting that 401k, that's now a check in your bank account, into a retirement account. You'll have 60 days from the date that check arrives in your mailbox to when you will need to move those funds into either another employer-sponsored plan or into an IRA. Keep in mind, the employer will withhold 20% as a mandatory IRS withholding, and you will be responsible for finding that 20% in your bank account somewhere so that when you deposit this money plus the 20% that they withheld into a new plan, you've fully deposited the entire amount that was rolled over. Now, the employer doesn't have to do this. If they do decide, they could theoretically keep it in the 401k as a small balance, or they could send it into an IRA. And obviously they'd send it into a like IRA. If there's Roth 401k, they'll move it to a Roth IRA. If it's pre-tax 401k, they'll move it to a pre-tax IRA. So I guess step one is to figure out what your employer is going to do. If your account is worth somewhere in the ballpark of $1,000 to $5,000, the employer can't just send you a check for that money, but the employer can move that money into an IRA. And again, they can just leave it in the 401k if they want to. And if the money is over $5,000, by law, the 401k company must maintain that within the 401k plan. Now, whether or not you're going to want to keep it in the 401k plan, that's a discussion for another segment, but just know that your options at this point are that they can just leave it in the 401k. Now, let's say your employer is just deciding to leave these monies inside the 401k. You have a few options. Number one, you can just leave it in the 401k as well. Number two, you can roll that money from 401k to IRA. Or number three, you can wait till you get a new 401k and you can roll old 401k to new 401k. Now, if you do decide to roll your 401k to an IRA, theoretically you can roll your IRA back to a new 401k once you get access to one. However, I have heard that some 401k providers won't accept incoming rollovers. I've never experienced that before, but that's what I've been told. In addition, once you roll Roth 401k money to a Roth IRA, you cannot roll Roth IRA back to Roth 401k. So keep that in mind as you're planning out your rollover strategies. Once the money is moved into a Roth IRA from a Roth 401k, it cannot be moved back. So what's your call to action here? I would absolutely create a plan for what ideally you will do with these funds, regardless of what your employer does. And if it does arrive as a check on your doorstep, here's why. Ultimately, your account balance was too small for them to want to maintain in the plan, and you will need to come up with that money to be sent into a retirement plan, plus the 20% mandatory withholding that they already sent to the IRS. If you do decide that you want to move the money out of the old 401k, please make a plan to audit that move a few months after you think the transaction's been complete. I've seen it be the case where a distribution, like a dividend, for example, didn't plop into the old account by the time that the sweeping was complete. And the sweeping is just where the two institutions are talking to each other, and the receiving institution sweeps and constantly looks over at the old account to grab that kind of stuff. If it's been a few months and you think the transaction is complete, just take a moment, log into the old 401k and confirm. At the end of the year, if you did move money out of the old 401k, regardless of what you did with it, you will get a 1099-R in the mail, probably at the beginning of the next calendar year. And you'll need to show that on your tax return that the money that was moved was either done in a tax-free manner, aka if it's from a 401k to a 401k or 401k to IRA, those are tax-free rollovers. However, if you took a distribution and you decided not to put that money into a retirement plan, you'll still get a 1099-R, but it will indicate that it's actually a taxable event. Okay, next up are stock plans. So we'll break these into two things. We'll break them into restricted stock units and options plans. So first one, super simple, restricted stock units. You should absolutely just consider all your vesting done at this time. You've been let go. Now there are some companies that will have a more liberal severance package where they will allow you to continue vesting, restricted stock units that were, you were anticipating to vest over another few months, but I wouldn't count on it unless you're with a super gracious employer. And then same philosophy there, right? Once the money lands into an investment account, come up with a proactive plan of what to do with those funds. The good news is these restricted stock unit plans are always held at like a custodian like Fidelity or Vanguard. So you don't have to move these monies for the account to stay there. And they're not going to send you a check for the dollar value of the account. Now, rebalancing, diversifying, things like that, those come later as part of your financial plan. But the good news is your hand won't be forced to make a decision here. Where your hand will be forced to make a decision is with options plans. So if you have unvested stock options, same thing, I would consider these totally done vesting. You've been let go, you are not entitled to receive any more stock options. However, if you do have vested stock options, there's generally an exercise window after you've been terminated whereby you can still exercise options a few months after you've been let go, but you'll need to check with your specific plan for details on that. But just know that just because you've been let go doesn't mean unexercised options are completely worthless. If the options are in the money, it could make sense to action and exercise them and then pocket the profits. Okay, now we've talked about the investment piece. Let's talk about some insurance pieces. First up is group life insurance. These are going to be plans that are provided to you by your employer. Generally, it's like 1 to 2 times your base salary in group provided life insurance. Typically, the employer will pay for a good portion of this. However, once you've been let go from the company, you're not entitled to keep these insurance benefits anymore. And odds are they will be canceled on you and you'll be out of insurance. Now, if you weren't reliant on these life insurance plans to begin with, then it's no skin off your back. However, if this was a sizable chunk of your family's life insurance survivor benefit needs, then it might behoove you to be aware of what your options are to keep this coverage. So the insurance companies might proactively reach out with a few options. They might say, hey, if you want to keep this insurance benefit, it'll cost you a little bit more, but we'll waive the medical exam. Or they might give you some other incentive to keep the policy alive. And that incentive might last for, 2 or 3 months after you've been let go, but there's generally going to be an expiration window on it. If you're in poor health, according to a life insurance company, it might make sense to pull the trigger on this and pay that additional cost, but waive a medical exam because perhaps you know that a life insurance company might have a hard time offering you new insurance at this stage of your life. Even if you're in great health though, from an insurance planning standpoint, it might still make sense to pull the trigger on obtaining this policy if it is waiving the medical, and then you can just look to replace that life insurance at a later date. Once you've been approved through another insurance carrier, you can just cancel this policy. I wouldn't advise the strategy of not pulling the trigger on any sort of life insurance offer that's given to you in the anticipation that if you did apply, you'd get better rates from an insurance company, because you never know what rules they're going to have relative to auditing your health, and you're going to pay a couple extra bucks for insurance in the meantime, and your family could need it anyways. Basically, I wouldn't recommend going for a duration without coverage if you can swing it. So your call to action here is to analyze the family's life insurance situation. And if you do need life insurance, then I would consider finding a way to continue this life insurance if you can. And if not, I would rapidly look at getting some additional private life insurance. Obviously, in a perfect world, you wouldn't rely on group life insurance because it is transient and you would only have privately held life insurance. But I realize that, more life insurance will just cost you more money. Okay, so last up is health insurance. It's the most complicated here, so I'll try to keep it simple and I'm saving it for last. Number one, obviously, if you've been let go from your company, you're not entitled to health insurance anymore through them, other than a provision called COBRA. Your company might extend your access to the health insurance plan for a few months after you've been let go, but that's going to be employer specific. And really all it does is cost them money, so they have an incentive to get you off the plan quickly because they're subsidizing the cost you otherwise would pay if you had that same policy held on the private market. Speaking of the private market, Once you've been let go, if you can't find a private health insurance plan that's right for your family, you are entitled to use COBRA, which allows you to extend your employer's health insurance plan for the next 18 months. The catch is the health insurance carrier is allowed to charge you up to 102% of that insurance premium for those 18 months. So while that might be super expensive to maintain, it could make sense for your situation if you can't find any other benefits. Now, you will only have 60 days to decide if you want to action or not action on COBRA, so you'll need to make a decision rather quickly after being let go. And your employer technically doesn't have to offer COBRA if they have less than 20 employees. Oh, and I should also mention, if you were fired for gross misconduct, you won't have the ability to access COBRA as an employee benefit. Now, you can get COBRA to last longer than 18 months in certain circumstances, such as disability, divorce, death, etc. We're not going to dive into the nuances of that here, but just know that generally it's 18 months for COBRA. They can charge you 102%, which sounds like a lot of money, but in your situation, it could make sense to maintain. So the call to action here is as you are doing budgeting for your family after being let go, and you're trying to sift out, what can we cut versus what we don't have to cut. And in addition, you're factoring in how long your savings will last before you need to give up the search on your dream job and maybe just find something to hold you over for a time period. Budget in a larger cost for health insurance. Don't just expect that your expenses are going to stay the same as they were when you're working, because if you do maintain a privately held health insurance plan, it's probably going to cost you more anyways, but definitely if you go with COBRA, you're going to be paying a lot more than you were when you were employed. Hopefully that was helpful in sharing a few of the things that you're going to want to be mindful of as you transition employers. If you have further questions, drop them in the chat below, send me an email, we'll get you squared away. Have an awesome rest of the week. Talk to you later. Bye.